touches my balls. I got staggered.
Nice.
Hiccup.
You've definitely seen my gameplay and you've also seen how fast I complete objectives. This time I'll be showing the methods I use. If you haven't watched my other guides, you should take a look because I expand on the techniques I talk about in other videos. I've said it plenty of times, you'll mess up a lot and you won't instantly see improvements. You need to practice these techniques and try not repeating the same mistakes. If you practice enough, you might be able to play even faster than I do. I'll leave timestamps so you can skip to parts you want to see. We're going to start with map mechanics you probably don't know about. When you're looking for objectives, you would usually know what you're looking for. What you don't know is exactly where to look for it. This is present in each map, but you probably didn't notice. Let's start with the most obvious one, which is signage, and I'm really surprised I need to talk about this, but some of the people I play with didn't know about signs indicating the exact rooms where you find objectives. This includes generators, acid buckets, and poison bottles. It is useful to know, but that's probably not what you're here for, so let's move on to the actual map mechanics. Starting with police station, we can split the garage right down the middle. What I've noticed from playing this map more than 100 times is that the generator and gas would usually spawn on opposite sides, meaning if you find multiple gas cans on one side, there's a good chance the generator will be on the other. This also works the other way. Keep in mind this isn't always the case and you can get lucky and find both on the same side, but this is a consistent pattern I noticed. When you get to the keys, the first and third key will never spawn behind their designated gate. I outlined the areas where you look for keys and you should notice that the keys won't spawn beyond the gates. This is with the exception of the second gate. I'm not actually sure why, but this is the only gate that has key spawns right behind it. In Bad Apples, we can also draw a line down the middle from the ticket booth to the donut shop. There's always going to be 2 minigames on the fountain side regardless of group size. You can think of Feed the Clowns as a tutorial minigame since you get it 100% of the time. If you ignore that one, you're going to have 1 minigame on both sides. If you're in a trio or quad, you're going to have a second minigame on the carousel side, but the number of games on the fountain side always stays the same. As I'm recording this, we have a new minigame on the fountain side called Kraken, and Pirate's Cove still doesn't exist. Also, if you want to be fast with pipes, then check out my pipe video. I went over every single pipe generation on the map and shortcuts with it. I'll put a link in the description. Radios and movie reels are pretty straightforward in Cleanse the Orphan, so I won't be explaining them. When you go to the chapel, you're going to be looking for 2 keys. We don't draw a line in the middle of the map, instead we use the stairs as a reference point. 1 key will spawn on top of the stairs and the second will spawn on the bottom. You're never going to have both keys spawn on the same floor. You can also look at the TVs, and if you're looking at it from this angle, the TV on the left shows the symbol for the key that spawns upstairs. The one on the right shows the key that spawns downstairs. Vindicate is usually a hard map for most people, but we can easily break it down. I'll put a video segment of a solo game where I look for bricks. There's 10 brick spawns you can check as you make your way to the main courtroom. It's useful to check these spawns so you don't have any trouble when dealing with witnesses or enemies in general. If you're speedrunning, it's not really practical to check all these spawns. You only want to check the ones that don't cause you to get to the button later than you usually would. There's also 4 more spawns you can check by the fountain. Now that you're probably full on bricks, we can continue to one of the things a lot of people struggle with, evidence rooms. I'll put a map on the screen with names my group calls them by. If you find it easier to remember the rooms by their letter, then by all means do so. Finding the evidence rooms was actually easier when there were 3 heads instead of 2. That's because there's 6 total evidence rooms and they're split into 3 sections with 1 evidence spawning in each section. If you didn't find an evidence in one room of a certain section, then it would have spawned in the other room on that same section. Let's say you didn't find an evidence box inside the left room, back room, and co-op room. That means your evidence would have spawned in the right room, middle room, and big room. Since we only have a maximum of 2 heads now, that means 1 section will always be empty. If you're solo or duo, then 2 sections will be empty, which is why I have a harder time finding the rooms than the numbers. I'm going to talk about my method for finding evidence numbers in a later section of the video, but for now you should understand how evidence boxes spawn throughout the rooms. I'll also be talking about witnesses in a later section too. There isn't a lot of strategies for Prevent the Futterman since the box skip was patched again. Our main strategy is to pick up every box, but as you grab them, you want to spam your ping button to negate any damaging effect. This also works on Crush the Sex Toys. You should also know that you want to do this on low ping. If you aren't playing on your closest servers, it won't matter if you spam your ping button when grabbing the wrong box. Speaking of boxes, there will always be 6 boxes for each letter, resulting in a total of 18 boxes. Even though you only need 1 or 2 A boxes, there's going to be 4 boxes that don't explode. There's also 2 B boxes and 2 C boxes that don't explode. Looking at all 18 boxes, 2 A boxes, 4 B boxes, and 4 C boxes will always explode regardless of the number of players. If you're having a hard time finding keys, you can use X-ray to see the key on your way to the room. You would first check the room it spawned in and use your rig as you make your way to it. Poison the Medicine is still a new trial, so we haven't found any huge time saves that don't involve glitches. Symbols usually take the longest to figure out because of the amount of spawns they have. This relies on knowing exactly where to look, similar to how I explained evidence boxes. If you have a trio or a quad group, then you're going to have 2 symbols upstairs and 2 symbols downstairs. I couldn't find a map of the warehouse anywhere, so I had to make one in MS Paint. You should have enough map knowledge for this map to make sense. The tutorial symbol is one of the 2 that spawn downstairs. We can split the map right down the middle, and from my testing I noticed that the other symbol downstairs will only spawn on the left side since the tutorial is on the right. The symbols upstairs also work the same way. There's going to be 1 on each side of the warehouse. If you're solo or duo, the only difference is there's only 1 symbol upstairs instead of 2. The downstairs one will still spawn the left side. The upstairs symbol can spawn anywhere. There's no specific side. It's also useful to know that the decoder will start scrambling when you get close to a symbol. This is something I've been asked a few times. I usually spend more time looking for evidence boxes than finding the numbers. Before moving on, I need to mention I see tons of people use the word something as a placeholder when finding numbers. I use dots instead. Let's say we're running around room and we find 2 as the first number and 7 as the third. It's faster to think of 2.7. In your mind than saying 2 something 7 something out loud, so your mind can go back to focusing on registering the next number faster. When finding numbers, the trick here is to take a quick and simple glance. You don't want to look directly at the number. This might sound weird at first, but there's an explanation to it, and it actually ties to how I personally study and read books. I'll try to keep it short. Your mind can process things as a whole a lot faster than if you looked at individual parts. Let's take a look at this small section of the script I'm using for this video. Look at these sentences and read them how you normally would. Now try reading this other section of the script. This time don't focus directly on the words. Instead, you want to try reading by skimming and looking at the dots between every word. If you notice that you read that paragraph much faster than the first one, then you should see how this applies to finding numbers. You walk around the room and take a quick glance without narrowing your eyes directly on the number while using dots as placeholders. This has a different effect on how fast you find them because you aren't constantly thinking and focusing on where you found the number. Instead, you'll be thinking about your current numbers and placeholders. By doing this, you'll realize how slow you've been when finding numbers, and your speed should drastically increase if you practice my method. Start by walking around the room at first, and once you're used to doing it this way, then you can start sprinting around the rooms and finding the evidence numbers within 10 seconds of activating the box. If you want to try this, then I suggest practicing on Vindicate or Tilt the Scales. On Vindicate, you should get used to activating a tutorial evidence and walking back a few steps to see all 4 numbers. Don't move your mouse or look directly at the numbers, just use your eyes. Witnesses can really be a pain in the ass to deal with sometimes, and I was originally planning to make a whole separate video for that. Thankfully, one of my friends stopped me from stretching this video beyond 15 minutes and actually made one himself. I'll put the link in the description and I highly recommend checking it out. He goes over a lot of different ways you can deal with witnesses and how you can adjust depending on the items you have available. You can practice this on Vindicate or Escape the Courthouse. I love doing radios, and it's actually one of my favorite mechanics in the game. If you watch any of my speedrun videos, then you would notice how I dial radios in 2 seconds. Sadly, if you're on console or you play with a controller, it's impossible to match this speed. When I got on a radio, I first checked for the red frequency and figured out its elevation, whether it's low, high, or in the middle. Based on the amplitude, I immediately adjust the dial. I turn it all the way up for high or all the way down for low. If it's somewhere in the middle, I dial it all the way down and make a quick estimate on where the middle would be. I'm not always accurate though. This also happens very quick, within the first second of getting on the radio. Next, I adjust the frequency, aiming for a rough estimate rather than perfect accuracy. You should notice how the frequency isn't always perfect, and that's because it doesn't have to be. Finally, I turn the phase dial and align the signal with the highlighted area on the screen. The main takeaway from this is the frequency doesn't need to be accurate, but the amplitude does. As long as it's close enough, then it's going to adjust itself automatically. If you want to practice this, you can do it on Cleanse the Orphans or Foster the Orphans. Now that I've explained how I do them, I'll play a few clips that are slowed down so you can see what I'm talking about. Tinkering panels are one of the easiest things to do quickly, but just like radios, you can't tinker in 1 second if you're on controller. Now there isn't really any tricks that guarantee hitting all the correct switches first try, but I have my own method that works more than half the time. You already know there's one switch that activates 2 switches on the panel, including itself. You should notice the bottom right switch is always there and it's already on, so you only need to tinker the other 5 switches. What I like to do is group 4 switches together, usually the ones closest to each other. Here's some examples. Afterwards, it's just a matter of clicking them as fast as you can. It doesn't always work first try, but this is a method I've personally used for hundreds of reborns.
Since Sus did not want to keep on working on this video, I have to go in and finish the outro. If you have experienced bugs while speedrunning, then you're not alone. There are still some weird bugs in this game that can happen to you if you're playing the game too fast, so just know it's not your fault if you start dealing with these bugs. There are probably some things he didn't go over in the video, but he was already out of ideas and he didn't want to make this guide longer than it should be. If you have more ideas, however, then let us know in the comments below. We would love to see more ideas and thoughts from the community. If you found any of this useful or have learned something new, then let us know. We're always curious to know if these videos are useful for anyone. Also, feel free to join our Discord, Brett and Friends. We're planning on making it more interesting.